Greetings, fellow book lovers, and welcome back to Colin's Corner. This is going to be episode 2 of Books and Basketball, and I have with me here one of my very first BookTube friends in Robert from Punk Rock Cereal Bowl. Robert, how are you doing?
Doing wonderful, especially considering how the season is going.
Oh, man.
Very,
We're going to have a lot to talk about.
very good right now. The vibes are great. So,
The vibes
those,
are great in Oklahoma City for sure.
yep. For those that don't know me, I'm Robert. I'm over at Punk Rock Cereal Bowl. That's my channel. I talk about books and stuff, like we all do. So, that's the word.
Absolutely. So, we are both, I think, one of the biggest things that kind of got us linked up towards the beginning was obviously the books. And I realized you were a pretty big sports fan, specifically basketball, and
Yeah.
myself as well. So this is gonna kind of lead us nicely into, if you guys are new here, I have this structured as a basketball game would be structured. So the first, I don't know, like maybe 5-10 minutes, it's gonna be the pregame. We're just gonna kind of hang out, catch up, see how each other is doing, what we've been up to, um, and so typically how I like to structure this is there'll be a series of questions that I ask, and the first answer will be book related, second will be basketball related, and as I like to say, we'll probably veer out of bounds here and there, to see kind of where the conversation takes us. So, first and foremost, I want to ask you, what are you currently reading?
Right now, I'm reading Ancillary Sword. And I mean, I say right now, like I actually haven't started it, but I just finished Ancillary Justice and it was
Okay.
awesome. And so I'm going to be starting that one. Like as soon as we finish this, I'm going to dive into Ancillary Sword.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so
Who's that by?
it is by Anne Leckie. Um, so the trilogy is the Imperial Rats trilogy. Ancillary Justice won the Hugo and the Nebula, I think, the same year.
Oh, this is the
It
one
was
you
like
just talked about in your most recent video, right?
yeah,
Okay.
it was a really big deal at the time it got released, and then I kind of it's one of those that, like, it was really hot there for a minute, and I don't see people talk about it as much lately, but she just put out another book in the series and, or not in the series, but, like, in the same world, earlier this year, and they just re-released the series with, like, new covers and everything.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they're kinda making a push, I think, to kinda bring it back, and it got me to finally read it. So it was
That's awesome.
awesome. It's like sci-fi space opera. I was talking in our Discord, and that it's kind of like it definitely has some Murderbot vibes. Like if people like Murderbot, they will like the setup and the main character of Anne Leckie stuff.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah,
Cool. Say hi to a couple people here. We got Dan, the
we got
first
Dan the man.
inaugural guest on Books and
Dan's
Basketball.
was
How
so
you
good.
doing,
It was so
Dan?
much fun. Oh my
I love
goodness.
I love chatting with Dan so much.
But I'm glad to see he's alive after the night that Philly had last night.
Oh
Uh,
man, I did not see the football game. I was watching the basketball game,
yeah,
but
football game
I'm
was
assuming it
brutal.
it didn't go well. Okay,
It was very
interesting.
sad for them.
Hi, Derry. How are you?
Was
One of
up.
my favorite people on BookTube. Um, so the football game was rough.
I'm sorry, Dan. We'll just we'll just pretend it didn't happen. I'm like I'm kind of a Eagles fan right now because Jalen Hurts spent a year at the University of Oklahoma, and I
I
really
forgot
like.
about that.
And so I got attached to him there and really liked. I really liked his character and kind of like what he brought to the game, and the stuff with him at Alabama and like sitting behind Tua, and then um, still staying in order to help them win the next year. I just thought that said a lot about who he is as a person. Um, so
Yeah, that is really cool. Um, I guess to move on to the basketball portion of the pregame, have you been watching games this year? I'm
oh
assuming
yeah,
yes.
yeah. I Yeah, I have League Pass. I had to put League Pass on a break for this month because it's just I mean it's December, and I manage a bookstore, and it's just the busiest time of the year. So I really had to like kind of make sure that I wasn't feeling the pressure because when I pay for League Pass, I'm like, well, I have to watch every game because I paid for it. And uh, so I haven't watched as many of the last few games, but I always watch, like highlights and recaps. And I listen to, there's a podcast that I really like, Down to Dunk. That's a really
Oh,
good
okay.
OKC podcast. So, I mean, I'm always listening to that. They have like 3 episodes a week. So I'm kind of like always hearing Thunder stuff. And yeah, it's been very good so far. Like much better than we expected, honestly, this
You
year.
guys are like electric this year and
Yeah.
a lot of fun to watch. I mean, I think real like people that follow basketball have kind of seen this iteration of your team coming a little
Yeah.
bit. But I
Yeah. Like,
still like I mean, I people do not understand how good Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is.
yeah.
Like, unless
We
you
we
really watch basketball,
yeah,
you just don't know.
even we didn't really know. We knew he was good, but we didn't know he was gonna be like this good. He's just been absolutely insane. Uh and yeah, the Thunder have been kind of like an NBA smart guy kind of team for a little while. And uh and so people know, but not the casuals. I think the casuals are a little bit more surprised because the Thunder were just like so bad. Just like a year ago, they lost by, or it was either a year or 2 years ago. They lost by like 70 points to the Grizzlies,
Yeah.
like in like
Yep.
the worst loss ever. And so, people had this image in their head of
Like in the
OKC.
history of the league, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was just like the most pathetic showing of basketball. And even I think for the most part, even while OKC was tanking, they had enough fun players on their team that as a fan, they were still playing a fun kind of brand of basketball, even though they didn't win. Um, so yeah, it was just like people didn't realize that even though they weren't winning games, they were building something special. And with Chet getting here this year, it has kind of
Oh, man.
arrived because like you look at the team
He is
last
incre
year and you'd be like, "Wow, this team is so good. They really need a rim protector. If only they had, like a 7 foot guy that could stretch by shooting threes and was like a good passer and had impeccable like timing at the rim." Like, oh wait, they have that guy. He's just he just got injured and didn't play this year. So Chet coming back has
So this
been,
is considered his rookie year, right?
yeah. So he's,
This is the first year he's played.
yeah, he's in the conversation for rookie of the year, kind of like the Ben Simmons, Blake Griffin type thing. So
Yeah.
we'll see. Wimby is really special, and so it kind of is going to depend on like how good the Thunder end up being this year. Because like if they go deeper into the playoffs, it's going to be hard to like not attribute that success to Chet. I think. Um,
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
and whereas
Because
Wimby's
more or
Wimby,
less, this team's basically the same
it's basically
structure
the
as
same. Yeah,
with
they also
as
have
Chet's just back.
their other rookie is Cason Wallace, and he's awesome. He was the 10th pick, and he is so good. He fits perfectly with what the Thunder are trying to do, like offense, defense. Just he knew exactly what his role was. Uh, so
Sweet.
he's been very good.
Man, the future's so bright for you guys.
I know.
Um, I want to catch up on a little bit of comments. As a
Yep.
Palm living in New Zealand, basketball isn't my thing. I'm a huge Liverpool Football Club fan instead. Derry, I have tried getting into soccer, and I don't know what it is. Like the World Cup comes around and I'll watch, with the hype of the world basically, but it's just never been something like I grew up playing and didn't have family members, you know what I mean? Are you a soccer fan at all? Football fan, Robert?
I played soccer growing up. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so I played a lot, but I mean, U.S. soccer kind of sucks. So like,
Yeah,
I think
they do not do a good job promoting it.
yeah.
And
And growing up, we didn't have like cable or anything, so it was hard to even watch soccer when it was on. So I never really attached to any teams. Um, there's like a minor league team here in Albuquerque, the United, and they actually like I've been to two of their games, and they're really fun to go to. And
that's cool.
people here in New Mexico really like them. So uh, it's pretty cool. I think they're gonna try and build a big like soccer stadium here for them and stuff.
Oh wow,
Um,
that's exciting.
so that's pretty cool. It's one of those sports where like if you get to go to the game, it really improves the experience. Kind of like baseball, where like you would have to pay
Okay, yeah.
me a lot of money to watch a baseball game on TV, but I will pay money to go to a baseball game, even if I mean I don't care about any of the teams, but I'll go, and have a blast at
Just
baseball.
hang out, yeah,
Yeah.
on a nice day
Uh,
outside. We got Britton here. How's it
yep,
going,
Britain's
Britton?
my Okie homie. So
Yes, absolutely. Jared from the Fantasy Thinker. I
yep.
love Jared's channel. Jared's awesome.
I was gonna say to Derry that one of my favorite all-time favorite basketball players for the Oklahoma City Thunder is a Kiwi. He's no longer with the Thunder anymore, but he's like one of my favorite basketball players of all time. So
Who was it?
Steven Adams.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I was a massive Pitt basketball fan growing up. Like my dad had season tickets, and Steven Adams played at Pitt, and we did not see
Yeah.
that coming.
No. Yeah, I mean
I don't know if anybody saw that coming.
he didn't really start playing basketball, I think, until late. Um, so but
He's
he's
just like he's just nobody in the league would mess with him
yeah,
ever.
he is just an absolute beast and he's so funny. Yeah,
Oh, he's
see Derry,
hilarious.
yeah, Derry knows what's up. So yeah, that's we'll talk about Mount Rushmore later, but Steven Adams is
Yes.
spoiler alert, Steven Adams is there for me. He's the best.
Okay.
When we traded him, I was so sad. I was more sad than when we traded Russ, honestly.
Wow.
Like I was okay with Russ going, but when we lost Adams, and like we had to because the contract was too big. But I
That's
wish
pretty crazy.
I wish we could have kept Steve-O forever.
How's it going, Rogier? Being a fan of a team can be tough, but if you're not there in the rough seasons, the real fans hate you in the
Yep.
yes. This is very true.
Yep.
This is very true. People ask me all the time why I still follow the Bulls so closely, and I'm like, because when we finally
When it happens, you're
reach
yeah.
the top, it's going to feel so good. Let's see anybody else. We got Usman here. How's it going,
What's up?
Usman? Yes, Derry knows Steven Adams. How could you not? Steven Adams' cousin is Valerie Adams, who absolutely dominated women's shot put for years.
Yeah,
Wow, I could see that.
he's got a huge family and they're all like freak athletes and stuff.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Well, I think we've caught up on some comments. We've gone through the layup lines. We're a little warmed up here. I think it's time to open the game with the first quarter. And the first quarter, I like to talk about people's origins of interest. So
Right.
basically, we'll start with books. What made you fall in love with reading? This could be like way back when, if you fell out of reading and fell back in love, however you want to take it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty open to interpretation for these, but what made you fall in love with reading?
Yeah. I will say um there's I was always a reader. Like my mom taught us all to read before we went into kindergarten. That was a big deal for her. What's up, Derek? And so like reading was always a big part. We always had tons of books around, and that was a big deal. So I read everything I could get my hands on through elementary school. And then in middle school, I was the youngest of 4, and my mom started going back to school. 2 of my brothers were out of the house. One of them was in high school, and so, like, he was always doing stuff after school, so I was, like, a latchkey kid who just came home and had nobody else around, and at that point is when I really just, like all I did was read when I came home. Is like, I would get whatever I could from the school library, bring it home, and read it. So I was just reading everything. That's when I was reading a ton of Star Wars novels, and then I read Wheel of Time in 8th grade, and it was all because like, I would get home and have 2 hours with nothing to do before everybody got home, and I would just read. So, it was
So
really
Wheel
kinda
of
like
Time's a very formative series for you.
yeah, yeah, it imprinted on me early. It was definitely my first, like, adult, epic fantasy. I mean, I read Lord of the Rings before that. I read that in 6th grade. Uh, but reading Wheel of Time for sure cemented, like, "Oh, this is a deal." Because like, I think in elementary school, just about everybody, like, kind of reads. Everybody's like, you're having to read for school and all that stuff. And then in middle school, people start picking up, like, oh, I'm a person who like, oh, I go and skate or like I play video games or I'm into sports or whatever. And people don't have to read as much. And at that point, that's when I was like, oh, I'm a person who reads. Like I read so many of the Star Wars expanded universe novels and then reading The Wheel of Time, and I didn't know anybody else reading it. It was like that series was just for me. I didn't know anybody that read Wheel of Time until I went to college. And so it was
That
just
was
like
your special place. That's
yeah, it
cool.
was just like this personal thing for me, and, like, I met people online, you know, that liked Wheel of Time, but that was it. I didn't know anybody around me that did. So that was really just,
That's really
like
cool.
it was reading was kind of a haven for me. I had a lot of not fun stuff happen, when I was a kid, and so getting to escape into books was, very big. So,
That's it's an interesting thing you brought up your mom kind of relaying the importance of reading to you, and I think not always, but for a lot of the people that I, have met in my booktube journey so far, it seems to me like one of the common threads is their parents read to them, or they were around their parents reading, or their parents imprinted on them how important reading, not only reading, but reading fiction can be. And I think, my mom was a massive reader. I always saw her with a book in her hand. And I think really, that made reading for me not feel like a foreign
yeah.
activity.
Yeah, it was just like
Um,
a normal
yeah,
a normal thing. Like, oh, adults read, everybody reads. Like all I'm the youngest of four. All my older brothers, they still read for fun. Um, and my mom and dad both read. So it just seemed kind of like this is what you do. Is like one of the we didn't really watch that much TV. So it was like reading is the hobby of choice.
yeah. Seems like Derry uh, is commiserating a bit with you and saying how important reading is
Yeah.
to just be able to escape some bad feeling situations. And we have Britain here saying, and like I said, this isn't always the case, but
Yeah.
luckily you found reading because, sometimes people don't end up finding how special reading can be if they aren't, you know, shown by a teacher or a librarian at an
Yeah.
early age or their parents. But, they're out there and it's a great way to experience just a different form of entertainment.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like you said, it's the importance of like the teachers and the librarians. I know a few people who it's like it was teachers that taught them, how important reading could be and kind of like made extra recommendations, spent time with them that they didn't have to spend because that's how awesome teachers and librarians are. They go above and beyond, even though they're getting paid nothing. And so there are a lot of people that come to it without their parents instilling that in them. But it's much easier if you get it from your parents, I would say.
Yeah, I think so too. And, I just try to personally, I mean, we were just talking before we got on here about, reading to our kids and spending time, that special time before bed, just telling stories. And I think, not trying to force my daughter to read things that I want her to
Yeah,
read, just kind of like giving her the freedom to like really, I really try to pay attention to like what like puts that light in her eyes.
yeah,
It can be Junie B. Jones, it can be a picture book, it can be The Grinch that we've read 400 times. Like it doesn't matter. If she's like showing that excitement, I try to cultivate that.
yeah. That's the absolute best thing because when they're real little, you just read them whatever, and they love whatever. But then around 4 or 5, they start really getting to be like, I want to read this, or like you can take them to the library and they'll start picking stuff out because they like to look at the cover and that kind of thing. And I'm exactly the same way of like whatever he wants to read, I want to read it. I don't care if it's Junie B. Jones or whatever. I'm gonna read it with him. So
Yeah. Darius says there's a lot of research into the value of having books existing in the house
mhm.
being good for kids. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that like, I've got books here and Haley, my daughter's got her own bookshelf and she just tonight organized it all by color. And I was like, that's
Awesome.
awesome. It looks great. You know what I mean? Just whatever gets her excited about it, I'm all for. Um, let's move on to the basketball aspect of the first quarter. And same kind of question. What made you fall in love with basketball? Is this something you've always been involved with and followed since you were little, or is this something you came to later in life? How did you fall in love with the sport of basketball?
There are kind of like there are a couple origin points for my love of basketball. Like the very first one is my dad was a PE teacher and a basketball coach. Before I was born, by the time I was born, he had 4 kids and was like, I can't pay for this on a teacher's salary. So he was selling insurance. But basketball was his first love. You know, like he played in high school. He was a manager uh for the Oklahoma Sooners basketball team whenever he was in college. So basketball was his love, and he taught us all to play. He coached all my brothers and me. I only played 1 season of basketball though because I chose soccer over basketball. Um, but that really that was the foot in the door. And then in the 90s and like early 2000s, OU actually had a really good basketball team. They made it to the Final Four in 2002. They were always in the NCAA tournament, getting to like the Sweet 16 and stuff. So they were good, and we watched a lot of college basketball, but I didn't watch a lot of pro basketball. And
Okay.
so that one, I would occasionally catch games, but it was always like Lakers games because the Lakers are always on. And so like as
No
a
matter
kid,
how bad they are, they're always
yeah.
on TV.
So I mean, as a kid, I watched a lot of like Kobe and Shaq, and I just thought Shaq was cool because he was in the movie Steel.
That's
And I was
amazing.
like, hell yeah, Steel. So that's why I love Shaq as much as I do, even though that movie is terrible. But then in the tragedy after of Katrina, the Hornets, their stadium, they couldn't play in their stadium, and they needed a home while everything got rebuilt in New Orleans. And so Oklahoma City had a brand new arena, and they were like, "Hey, we'll host, the New Orleans Hornets." And so for a year, they were the like Oklahoma City New Orleans Hornets, and that's when pro
Wow, I
basketball really
forgot
like
about that.
jumped onto the scene. I didn't actually end up going to any of those games, but like I watched a bunch of them. Chris Paul was actually on that Hornets team.
Yeah.
Um, and I was trying to find my Hornets hat because I do have a Hornets hat from that time. And I couldn't. It was my friend's hat, but he gave it to me, and and I was trying to find that because that was a big deal getting a professional team in Oklahoma because it's like nobody cares about Oklahoma. It's just like a waste,
Yeah.
it's a flyover state. And so then getting them that made me start paying attention to the NBA, and then a couple years later, then we got the Thunder. And at that point, it's like we had Kevin Durant, we had Russell Westbrook, then James Harden. And it was just like suddenly we had this team and it was electric, like going downtown to the games. Even like if you didn't actually go into the game, you could go downtown and there are bars around where the stadium, where the arena is. And it's like you'd go and you'd watch the game. And then like I remember during the playoffs, you would watch the game and then like when they won, it was just like the streets would fill with people that were just like out of their minds. When we beat the
That's
Lakers
really, really
in that
cool.
in that playoff series, it was just like it was absolutely insane in Oklahoma City for us to beat the Lakers and just be like, "We're here, we made it." So being around that was just like you couldn't not be a Thunder fan uh, at that point. And
You
I've
guys
been
came out of the gate swinging. I mean, I'm sure you didn't know at the time that you had what, at least 2 future league MVPs?
three
Did Harden
MVPs.
win?
Yeah, because
3,
Harden,
they all 3 won.
yeah,
Okay.
all three got an MVP. Um, and
That's
so
incredible.
it was like the first year that the Thunder were there, they stunk. They were super bad. Um, but then then they got Westbrook and then they got Harden. It was like first year was bad, second year was like okay, and then third year they went to the playoffs and it was like, all right, we're here. And it's kind of what the Thunder are doing again, which is weird to see history repeat itself like that.
Yeah. Huh. Hey, Rogue, how you doing?
What's up,
Rogue, one of
Rogue?
my most frequent and thoughtful commenters. Love Rogue. Um,
Rogue got me to read In Conquest Born, which I'm forever grateful for.
I think, yeah, we talked about this on, like, a sprint or something one time,
Yeah.
and, that's awesome, man. Alright, well, I think we've had a good first quarter. We're gonna take a fake short commercial break and move on to second quarter. Where this I was excited to get to the second quarter specifically for you as a guest because the second quarter we're gonna talk about state of the game. So, this could mean a few different things. Are you happy with what you're reading currently, or do you feel like you need to make a change? And this is the interesting part. Are you excited about where the industry is right now, specifically for like maybe our niche genres of like fantasy and sci-fi? As a bookseller, I'm sure
Yeah.
you've got a good beat on the newer stuff coming out, which is something that I don't often pay a lot of attention to because I'm so busy trying to dig backwards
Yeah.
still. But what do you think about the state of the game for fantasy and science fiction right now, and even horror if you're
Yeah.
keen on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's really it's really interesting. I can talk about my like for me personally, my state of the game is like I'm enjoying what I'm reading and I've just decided I'm reading whatever I can. Like I'm reading outside of all the genres and that's really been helping me. Is not just reading sci-fi and fantasy, but reading mystery, reading, like lit fic, nonfiction, all that stuff. So my reading state of the game is great at the moment. But to talk about like what I'm seeing, you know, at my bookstore, I think like traditionally published sci-fi and fantasy still is doing really, really well. Um, when like at the beginning of this year, we had one bay of science fiction and fantasy. It's a pretty small bookstore. And historically, they didn't have anybody that read sci-fi and fantasy before I got there. So it used to be like the saddest store in town when it came to sci-fi and fantasy. I went in one time like 4 or 5 years ago, and they had like two shelves, and it was all face outs. It was like I don't know, 12 books or something like that. It was the most
Wow.
pathetic thing. Um, but since I've been there, I've been able to curate that section and get in stuff that like I personally like, and we have a few more people that read sci-fi and fantasy now, and so we've really put in stuff that we like and we believe in, and it's now the second best selling section in the store. Um,
Wow, that's awesome.
and so people love it. And the thing with people that read sci-fi and fantasy is they love having the physical books. Like that's
Yes.
we're one of the genres where uh people come out and they buy the hardcovers for sci-fi and fantasy. And then in some other
Yeah.
genres, people will be like, uh, nah, I'll wait until it comes out in paperback. Real quick, I did read The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, and it is as amazing as the title says it is. That's like a top 10 book of all time for me. That book is so freaking good. It
Wow.
absolutely blew me away. Uh, yeah,
Okay, duly noted.
yeah, that book is incredible. So, yeah, like traditionally published, I'm seeing a lot of cool stuff coming, like upcoming. I try to, as often as I can, I try to do videos about like upcoming releases because I'm looking through catalogs, ordering for the store anyway. Um, and I see a lot of cool stuff. It's interesting being on BookTube and seeing how big self pub, like the indie stuff, is on BookTube, and how open everybody is to it. Because in the traditionally published world, there are a lot of snobs and a lot of people who kind of look down on the indie world and don't treat it very seriously. And like, we get people that want us to stock their book, and they're not the indie authors that we talk about and we see on BookTube. The people we talk about are the people who have researched like why you would go indie, how to do it, how to market your
Right.
book. Like they're paying for editors and artists, and like they are self-publishing. They're independently publishing. They're not just uploading a Word document and printing it out. And like
Yeah.
that's that's basically what we see is people come in and like, I published a book, you should put it on your shelves. And you just look at it, it is the most garbage thing you've ever seen. So unfortunately, people that work in independent bookstores, our opinion gets kind of jaded about indie publishing because we see these people who think just because they have access to Amazon publishing, they're now like, they
A
did it.
published
And
author,
it's just
yeah.
like, you didn't, they didn't edit their book. They didn't do anything. So that kind of sucks, honestly. But I've enjoyed seeing the success of indie authors and seeing kind of like what it's doing. And the distinction that I would make is that like indie indie is kind of serving the people who are hardcore fantasy fans, and they're like, I want to read fantasy all the time, and there's not enough from the traditionally published world. Um, it's it's big at my store, but it's not. It's still a pretty niche genre. It doesn't get the acclaim that the other genres do, and so they can't put as much money into it. They can't buy every book that gets written. That's cool. Unfortunately, that's just kind of not the way it is. There's a lot of ways those decisions get made, and with indie, you see stuff that like was too weird for an agent to take a chance on,
Right.
or maybe it's not even that it's too weird, it's that it's kind of like it's too I would say it's honestly often it's more that it's too similar to things that have come before. And they're like,
Okay.
oh, we don't need another one of these. We've already got one of these on our roster. Like I already rep an author who writes this type of fantasy. I don't need another one. Whereas
That's tough.
with indie stuff, it's kind of like a lot of it is like, I really like this. Who else is writing something kind of like this? I want to read more of it. And then you have this whole ecosystem of fantasy that can kind of that coexist. They're not really like fighting against each other. It's they found the audience, and those audience are going to devour everything. Um, and so
That makes sense.
I think you're seeing a lot of the kind of like the epic fantasy is really thriving in indie, um, like sword and sorcery type of stuff. The more traditional like style or like things that are playing off of those genre tropes are really thriving in indie because it's the hardcore fan base that wants to see those tropes played with and all that stuff. And then with traditionally published, I mean, you've got your big names, and then what I'm seeing is like is more, um, I guess, kind of like that's where I'm seeing more like weird takes on fantasy. That's where you're getting stuff that is a little bit different. Stuff like the Greenbone Saga, maybe is a good example of that. Where
Okay.
like there's not really much like the Greenbone Saga. It's pretty different. Stuff like Gideon the Ninth, you know, things
Okay.
that really um, are very like style is different. It's really going to kind of stand out, and I think with traditionally published, you have to have something that's going to make it stand out so that people buy it. And
That
so
makes sense.
that's kind of why the gates are as strict as they are. Unfortunately, is that like they only have so much money, and it is a business for them, and they have to make these decisions of what's going to stand out on the bookshelf. And it ends up being, we're going to do on the Discord a read along of Spear Cuts Through Water. I think that's the name of that book. But that's a
Yeah.
great example of the kind of thing like that's what you're getting from traditionally published. I think I haven't read it, but I know enough about it that I'm like, I think if you independently publish that book, people would read it and be like, this author doesn't know what he's doing. So like they would stop reading halfway through because he's playing and being experimental in a way that like when you've gone through the gatekeepers of the traditionally published system, you kind of have a little bit of like, okay, people believe that he's doing something worthwhile here. And it gives you a little bit of the benefit of the doubt of like, I'm going to continue on with this. So
That makes a lot of sense.
yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing. That's my interpretation of what I'm seeing. And then obviously you've got like Brandon Sanderson, who's just like off doing his own thing. Uh,
Yeah, anything that that man puts out is
yeah.
gonna sell
Um,
tons and tons of
but
copies. Well, that's a very interesting, like, in the industry take, and, obviously, like you were talking about, we've now seen, and it's wonderful because we get to even interact with a lot of these self-published authors, just kinda learn about the process. I've even heard, like, horror stories of people that have, like, done the research and decided to go traditional, and it turns out, like, they got signed, but then the traditionally published
mhm,
company doesn't wanna put the money into, like, actually endorsing it and promoting the book, so now they're just signed to a contract and they aren't getting the promotion that they wanted, and they can't take their work and do what they want with it because they signed a contract with the company. And so, of course, there's benefits to both. If you sign with a company and they decide to promote your book, that's a
yeah,
ton of personal money and personal effort and personal energy you don't have to put into it.
yeah,
But what if they absorb you and then they decide, "Nah, this is too similar to this one. We don't think it
yeah,
will compete, so we're not gonna put the money into that one. We're just gonna keep pumping this one up." And
yeah. And
it
it's
seems
definitely
like
bad.
murky waters.
Yeah, it's definitely bad for kind of like people of unrepresented groups underrepresented groups, because if you're a minority in some way, a lot of times they're kind of like, we've got the one for our imprint. We don't need another one. And it's just like, that's absolutely bogus. Um, so
It's sad that
I hate seeing that
that's
stuff
the
in the
business
industry.
side of things, it
Yeah.
seems like.
And
And
you know,
let's see.
it is what it is. Unfortunately, but there's good and bad. I think right now is a really interesting time for the publishing industry because um there are a lot of things like merging together. We've got the big five publishers right now, and it used to be six. And Penguin almost bought Simon and Schuster, uh, and then that didn't end up happening. But like bigger companies will buy imprints and do just what you said, where like they acquire an imprint and then they decide they don't want to promote the stuff that was on that imprint anymore. I've known a few like sci-fi and fantasy series that just like got killed after like the third or fourth book. They had more planned, but the way the industry shook out, they didn't get a chance to write them, and that kind of sucks.
Yeah, Derek kind of is touching on, I guess, what I was a little bit trying to hint at. It seems like sometimes these bigger companies will just, and this isn't just books, but it seems like they'll just buy up intellectual property for the sake of
Yeah, just to have it.
not wanting other people to own it. Like maybe someday down the line we'll want to do something with this, but that kind of stinks if you're talking about an author who's, not that there's many of these, but like a Stephen King or a James Patterson where they're just pumping out books and books and books. I mean, if an author was working on a book for 15 years and they finally get traditionally published just to find out that their book's not going to be pumped with, the backing it needs to get out to the public, that would really, I mean, that would just be devastating
Yeah,
for that
yeah. I think
author.
the way it is now, traditionally published versus indie, either way, so much of the legwork is going to be on you. Um, that it's there's not For a new author, there's not too much a difference in what you have to do in terms of like if I got traditionally published tomorrow, I would be doing everything that we're seeing the indie people in like the booktube world doing. I would be reaching out to booktubers. I would be trying to get word of mouth going. I would be, jumping on live streams, doing whatever I could to get people to know about my book, because I would know that like chances are, unless I'm just really lucky, I'm not going to be the heralded book that's coming out that year. I'm just going to be one of the many. Every month there are tons of sci-fi fantasy releases that I can't buy from my store because I can't buy them all. Like I have to pick which
Right.
ones I'm going to bring in, and if I'm hearing stuff about it, chances are I'm going to try and bring it in. So
That's an interesting point too, because it's, I mean, why would you not in today's day and age, even if you were traditionally signed, get out there?
yeah,
I mean, if you really wanted your book to succeed, why would you not at least try? Because you never know what's going to happen. I mean, look what happened with the Sun Eater series. I mean,
yeah,
like, it got in Mike's hands and he loved it. He's got a big audience, and I mean, look what's happened with Christopher Rocchio now. I mean, so many
yeah,
people understand how talented of a writer he is now, and it just took, a couple big channels getting their hands, and it seems like now so many other big channels are like, oh, this series is actually fantastic
yeah, yeah. It's
because
like
he got out there.
Daniel Green talked about it, and then I saw that Chris Rockio's like they sold out. Like his book is on back order now because too many big
That's
channels like Daniel
amazing.
Green and Petrick and Mike have all talked about it recently. And so it's like, that's the stuff that can happen. Uh yeah. Reese, it's weird to me how big Reese influence on the book world is.
Yeah, she's like got a whole section of her own at Barnes and Noble.
Yeah. But it's
Um,
it's great for authors to get movie rights taken from them because they have to re-up those like every year. And so I know of authors who they live off of their movie rights. They're making like 10 grand a year basically on like royalties from their book, and they're making, you know, 40, 50 grand on their movie rights every year.
yeah,
So,
that's
you know,
crazy.
good on Reese actually for for buying all the movie rights because she's helping those authors out a lot. I don't care if they don't get made.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've had a very interesting conversation in the second quarter around books. So let's move on now to the state of the game. So we were just talking about the traditionally published book industry being a business, and we hear NBA players all the time, especially once they get some kind of status in the league, be very frank about the league being a business. And we've
Yeah.
seen weird trades go down that seem disrespectful to players. I mean, it's of course happened to Derrick Rose, DeMar DeRozan, countless others, I'm sure. The bottom line
Yeah.
for this question is the NBA is a product that is consumed by consumers. And do you think the NBA is displaying an enjoyable product at the moment? Is there anything that you love about the game, that you dislike about the game? What are your currently thoughts about the state of the NBA?
Yeah. Um, Overall, I do really enjoy where the NBA is at. I think um I think we're starting to see a little bit more parity across the league. Um and I do kind of think that the era of the super team is like kind of coming to a close. Um, we had the whole last decade was the super team. But the team that was the dynasty was the Warriors, and I hate the Warriors so much. But almost all of like most of their players were like they were built through the system. I mean, like they got Andre Iguodala, and then obviously they got KD to help them win the rest of their stuff. Um, but they ended up making a super team, but the core of Golden State was like developed through the system,
Homegrown, yeah.
and they played team basketball. Like that's what makes Golden State so special is the way that they play together. And as great as Steph is, I mean, Steph couldn't really win without Clay Thompson. You know, like
Or Draymond.
or Draymond. Andre Iguodala won the Finals MVP that year, which was kind of weird, but
Yeah.
he made a huge difference. And so like Steph Curry is going to go down as one of the greatest players of all time, but what made that team special is how it worked around him. And I think that's made an influence on teams like the Thunder in the way that we're approaching the rebuild this time, where it's not as focused on like we have a superstar player and we're going to build around them. Like we didn't know Shea was going to be like a top 5 NBA player.
Yeah.
Like we were building as if he was going to be top 15, top 20 at best,
Which is still crazy.
which is still great. But we were thinking, that like he was going to be really, really good, but not as good as he is, and that we were going to build this team around him that had people who can make decisions with the basketball, can kind of play really, uh, positionless basketball in that way, and
Yeah.
really focusing on the team aspect. And so I think that's where the game is going, and you can see like, the Denver Nuggets winning last year. Jokic is obviously like he's a generational player, but he doesn't play like LeBron. Like
No, the Denver Nuggets are a perfect example of a system-based team
Yeah.
winning. Like, they just are so disciplined and fundamentally sound on both ends of the court that they ran through all the talent.
Yeah. And so
And, like, honestly, their games were, like, not the most exciting games.
Yeah.
Because they trounced a lot of people.
Yeah, they just demolish people.
But that's an interesting take. I think, the falling out of the super team seems to kind of be a true thread. But I think part of that, in all honesty, is that we don't have the next LeBron.
Yeah.
We don't have the next Curry. I mean, there's been some that have supposed to have been the next. But honestly, if you think about it, and this could just be because like the league in general is way more talented, but
Yeah.
there's nobody that's like straight taking over within their first like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Like LeBron did and like Curry did. And granted, like it did take those guys time. I think people forget even, back to Jordan, these generational players, they had some rough first couple seasons, but
I think it doesn't help that like LeBron is still playing.
incredibly well.
With when you look at what's changed a little bit around the league, I mean, this is in basically all pro sports, is that professional athletes realize that like if they're a professional athlete, they can't just like take the off season off. Really, they still have to take care of their bodies, and like they're doing all sorts of stuff to, um, you know, to lengthen their careers, to stay healthier longer, to stay active longer. It's wild that LeBron is still playing and is still as good as he is. I mean, he's changed his game a ton because of that, but that's also like, you know, that shows a I wouldn't I wouldn't really credit LeBron with being very self-aware. But like when it comes to his game, there's enough of it that he's learned to, increase his three-pointers because like he can't attack the rim in the way that he used to. Uh, and so we haven't seen the next generation because the previous generation is still hanging around. Like they're
And
not,
still on top. I mean, hey,
so
Curry's still out there dropping 6 threes in a game. I mean, Kevin Durant is still unbelievable.
yeah, we don't talk about Kevin
LeBron is,
Durant.
well, still. Um, there are some people coming up. I want to touch on Jared's question here because this is an interesting one. What do you think of the in-season tournaments? Did you enjoy this addition to the regular season?
Yeah, I
Because we haven't
honestly,
talked about this. I want to hear your like
yeah.
unedited thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think the in-season tournament is really cool. I think it's a really good idea. Adam Silver's been talking about it forever. Wanted to bring it in, and so I love. Uh,
You
Bretton's
looking
got a
at
good comment. Yeah, yeah. At least Lincoln Riley had the decency to go and suck super hard at USC, and
that's true.
Kevin Durant won championships. But I think the in season tournament is a good idea. I think this year it's the first one, so we're gonna have to see if it can really prove to be what the NBA wants it to be. I think the players and like the people in the NBA bought into it, but I don't think it made much of a splash outside of like the main NBA people. Like I bet people in the chat who like don't follow NBA might not even know an in season tournament happened. Um, but
That's probably true.
but I think that'll grow, and I think it definitely made games more competitive, um, and it makes this time of the year interesting. I think the NBA was really lucky that the Lakers made it because the Lakers traveled so well to Vegas that like, you know, the the crowd was really hyped for them. Um,
Yeah,
but
I
I
have.
mean, I didn't love the
I mean,
Lakers being in it, but
when I
but
saw
I'm
that it was Lakers versus Pacers, I just was like,
I
all right, well, the Lakers are just. There's no way the Pacers. There's no way the NBA is gonna let the Pacers win this
uh,
one. It's just not possible.
but I think
Um,
I think it's good because it creates an elevated game. It creates elevated games, and it gives coaches a reason to try their like their in season lineups. To try the lineups that are going to matter. OKC is really still developing, but they played lineups in some of those games that were like, okay, they're trying to win right now.
yeah,
And so I think it's good for the young players. I think it'll be really good for the young players to get those in season tournament games because like even teams that would not make the playoffs get a chance to kind of have an elevated game in their
right.
season, and I think ultimately that's going to pay off in a big way. So we'll see. I liked the idea of changing the courts. Some of the courts really sucked,
They were pretty ugly, and there was a lot of
but
slippage going on.
yeah. But
Um,
I like the idea of the special courts. I just think maybe tone it down a little bit.
yeah. I want to say hi to Drew here. He said he loved the in-season tourney. There were a lot of really competitive games. I agree. I think bottom line is that with the in-season tournament, the NBA just wanted to add some excitement to the regular season. It's
Yeah.
a long season, and the NBA is competing at this time of year with end of season NFL, which is a really hard sport to take views off of, and it forces, and the NBA has been cracking down on this too. It forces players to not take rest days, and it felt like during the in-season games, the intensity was higher. The
Yeah.
players wanted to win,
Yeah.
especially the players that were not on max and super max contracts. I mean, just simply making the finals
Yeah.
they each won like 200 grand for like losing and then 500
Yeah,
grand, I think, for winning. I mean, that's big. If you're on a rookie
yeah,
contract,
yeah. That's huge.
that's huge.
When the Thunder lost to the Kings in one of their in-season tournament games, and it the report was like before the game, the Kings coach just like had a slideshow of all the things they could buy with $500,000
I
to
know.
motivate them to play, and they came out and just like rocked the Thunder. It sucked.
That's amazing.
I was not a fan
That's
of
a
that,
what a coaching tactic.
but um,
This is kind of calling back to what you were talking about. Alex Ferguson with Manchester United was a huge proponent of the team being more important than the player. The position is interchangeable. Um, I think that this is
oh,
more
Rogue.
important, maybe now, just because the league has almost become positionless for
Yeah,
the most part. There's a lot of switching. There's a lot of forward points. There's a lot of point centers. There's a lot of just switching everything unless you have a true center like a Jokic. But
yeah,
even Embiid, like these guys have the athletic ability to like
yeah. But even
run
yeah, it's like
all kinds of wild defensive schemes. Where are we at
yeah,
here? Ooh, that was a good one to be at.
my guy. I've been enjoying the Kings. The Kings play a really fun brand of basketball and the light the beam and all that stuff. And the Kings had it so rough for so many years that I'm like, I can't be mad at the Kings except for when they're beating the Thunder. Um, any other time, I'm happy to see the Kings doing well.
This is a very fair point for not a big basketball fan. It's
Yeah,
not does not instill fear into the heart of the
it
enemies.
is. It is not great. I was gonna say
Um,
I was gonna answer. Derry was asking, is it like the knockout FA Cups during the league season of football? It's exactly what that is for the NBA. They took that model and thought it worked for football and said, you know what, we've got a long season of games. Let's try it in the NBA, and that is what it is.
what needs to happen to make All-Star Weekend fun again and have the superstars compete in the dunk contest like MJ and Kobe did?
I don't know, man. I
I don't either. I think too
I
many players are worried about injury
yeah. Uh,
and the accolades just don't mean enough to them to like want to compete. They changed like the scoring of the
they did
All-Star
the Elam
game.
ending, but then they just changed it back. Um,
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they got rid of the Elam ending again. So I don't know. I don't have a good idea really for what they could do to make the All Star Weekend like more fun. Uh,
I personally don't think there's a lot of All-Star Pro Bowl like weekends in any of the pro sports that are
yeah,
particularly fun. I
I
mean,
think I think what they did with the NFL's like Pro Bowl stuff was actually kind of fun. Um,
yeah,
where now they're like playing dodgeball and like you
that's
know
true. It's fun.
and
It's not competitive though.
yeah, like that was more fun than like when they would actually play a game. Like, uh, so I like what the NFL did, but I don't think that I just don't think you can do much else with the the All Star game. It's always just going to depend on the personality of the players, and you'll get somebody who comes in and decides I'm going to be the one who gets MVP this year, and they play super hard, and the other people are like, nah, I don't want to do that. So
Yeah, you can
um,
have it, bro. Like,
yeah, I have not heard a single person come up with a good idea for the All Star weekend. Um,
yeah, this hit the basketball community very, very hard.
yeah, that
Um,
was Kobe was an interesting person, and there's things that he did that were not great, but I think who he who he became after some of that stuff and who what he tried to be for his daughters was really special. Um, and I was heartbroken, honestly, when that
yeah,
happened because it was him and his daughter, and I mean, I remember being at work when I found out that it happened, and yeah, that was really sad. Um,
the All-Star weekend is just like the best players in the league are voted for by partly by the fans and the coaches and like a panel of judges, right? Like a panel of like reporters and figureheads in the media. It's like an accolade. It's an honor to add to your resume to get named an all-star, and they play like an actual game against each other, and there's skills competitions. So
Yeah,
it's kind of just like a fun for the fans type of weekend that the players
yeah,
don't particularly take very seriously, which is kind of the qualm that a lot of people have with it.
yeah.
But
And, like, specifically, like, the dunk contest used to be kind of, like, the most fun thing, and you would get players who, were, like they were actual all-stars, like, great players that were out there doing these incredible dunks, like MJ, and Vince Carter, and all these people that had these incredible dunks, and then now, um, you get people that are just doing the dunk contest that aren't actually all-star players. They're just, like, they volunteer to do the dunk contest, and you get,
yeah,
like, last year, the person who won is somebody who doesn't really play in the NBA and is, like, more known for being a professional dunker. Like, that's his job, and he went and did the dunk contest, and it's like, that's not the spirit of what we want here,
yeah.
so I did not enjoy that.
Might be a hot take. I think the most exciting part of All-Star Weekend is the three-point shooting contest.
Yeah,
If it's tight.
yeah. My
It's
guy,
fun to watch.
Isaiah Joe better get in the three-point contest this year. If
His Kobe White
he
too.
he should have been in it last year, and, uh, if he's not in it this year, I'm gonna rage. Um, yeah, that's kinda what I'm talking about. Kobe, interesting person. Um, but I think I'm a big I have some like kind of hot takes around like this kind of thing, but I think people, you know, you can people can grow. Like that's that's kind of the whole point of life. And like um, we saw Kobe from the time he was in high school and growing up. He was in the public eye. And I think, he made a lot of mistakes and there were a lot of things that I did not like about Kobe. I think he was not a good teammate. Um, and that cost the Lakers a lot. Like he cost his team because he was not a good teammate. Um, but there were other aspects, and I think after he left basketball, that's the Kobe that I kind of admired. Actually, was more what I was seeing him do with his time outside of basketball. After he was like not trying to win, and he had to figure out like what am I going to do with the rest of my life. That's a really interesting question to me. And seeing what he was doing, he was really involved with women's sports because of his daughters, and I thought that was really admirable. So I just, yeah, Kobe's an interesting person, and I do not begrudge anybody who does not like Kobe, but I have,
Yeah.
I have a soft spot for kind of like post player Kobe.
Well, I don't want to keep you all night, so let's try to move this
Yeah,
on a
let's
little
get
bit
let's get going.
to the halftime show.
Yep.
So this, I don't know. I'm gonna say it's everybody's favorite part. It might not be, but these are some fun, tough questions to ask. And the first, obviously, will be book related. What is your Mount Rushmore of authors? So your top four. This could be currently. This could be all time. However you want to take it. If you had to pick four, what would they be?
Okay. I kind of went with this almost more like my Mount Rushmore like desert island authors of like if I'm gonna
Okay.
go on a desert island and I only get these authors' books, these are who I'm gonna pick, I think. And it's gonna be Robert Jordan, Wheel of Time. I love Wheel of Time. I will silently not abide uh Wheel of Time slander. Uh, Everyone has their own opinion, but your opinion's wrong if you don't like Wheel of Time. And I love it. I've read it multiple times. I mean, I talked about it being a formative thing for me. But I mean, it's like, it's a 14-book series, 15 if you count the prequel. And I've read that series like 4 times. It's a huge part
Wow.
of me. It's a huge part of me wanting to be a writer. Um, that series is incredible and it really rewards repeat reads um, in my opinion. So definitely love Robert Jordan. Number two, following in his shadow, will be Brandon Sanderson. I got into Brandon Sanderson because I found out he was going to finish the Wheel of Time for Robert Jordan. So as soon as that got announced, which was actually it was in like the Tulsa newspaper. There was a
Oh
little
wow.
blurb that was like about Robert Jordan passing and Brandon Sanderson was going to finish it. I could not believe that like Wheel of Time was mentioned in the Tulsa newspaper. I was like,
That's crazy.
so I remember seeing it there, and I was working at a used bookstore at the time, so I went and I got his first book, Elantris, was out. He had Elantris, and he had the first two Mistborn books out. So I went and I read everything he had at that point, and then from then on, I basically read everything he's written as it's come out, like all of his adult stuff. I hadn't read all of his YA, but
What did you think, like, so when you were going into these like Brandon Sanderson books, were you like the I don't know, man, you can't do what Robert Jordan did, or were you like really open to like, okay, they picked this guy for a reason, he must be really good? Like, what was your kind of thought process towards Brandon
um,
Sanderson before he is who he is now?
yeah, I mean, it was a very different vibe for who Brandon Sanderson was at the time. This was 2007. Uh, he's basically an unknown, but he had written this really, really touching, like, kind of memorial, like, blog post about what the Wheel of Time had meant to him um, before he got announced. It was one like that was passed on to Harriet, and that was part of why he got picked. Was actually this thing that he wrote, um, and so I knew he was going to take care of the Wheel of Time, and then reading his stuff really kind of filled me with confidence. I felt like he would be able. I felt like he would be able to pull it off because I think Wheel of Time starts with a lot of traditional fantasy ideas, but by the time you get to like book four, it really starts to deviate and become much different. And it starts to explore
Okay.
different things and use and like it starts exploring the magic stronger in that like in the first three books, magic is a little softer and you kind of don't know what they're doing. But then you start like some of the characters start learning how to do the magic. And at that point, the reader starts to understand the magic and you understand like
Oh, okay.
there's some more rules to it and things. And so obviously Sanderson's like the rules magic guy. So seeing the way that he wrote, I felt like he was gonna do a good job with it, and I was not disappointed. He did a
So
fantastic
you were
job.
comfortable that he was gonna like land the plane safely.
Yeah, yeah. I felt like he was gonna do a good job with it. He really did. So I've been,
Cool. All right,
you
so
know,
you have Robert Jordan, Brandon Sanderson so
yep.
far.
All right, and then we're gonna go Werner Vinci, who
Interesting.
wrote A Fire Upon the Deep and A Deepness in the Sky. So he's written a bunch of short stories that I actually haven't read. So I need to read his short stories. But A Fire Upon the Deep is what I consider to be my favorite science fiction novel of all time. Um, I
You've told me about this book
Yeah,
before.
I love A Fire Upon the Deep. That book is awesome. And then A Deepness in the Sky is set in the same universe, but it takes place at a different time, and it is also really, really good. And then he wrote a book, Rainbow's End, that is like a near future science fiction. Uh,
Okay.
that kind of has to do with like augmented reality stuff, and I think it takes place in like 2025. So it's like a little different. Yes.
You're schooling some people.
Werner Vinci is my guy. I don't think I have the book in here right now. But
I know someone who does.
A Fire Upon the Deep. Um, like my one sentence pitch for it used to be just space wolves with flamethrowers. Uh, that's that's a thing in it. So it's,
I'm in.
that's super cool. But yeah, Rainbow's End is awesome, and uh, it's really like reading that book about how they use augmented reality. He wrote that in I don't know 2010 maybe or even earlier than that, and
Okay.
it's like dead on for like what we're headed for in terms of like how people are going to be using augmented reality. In my opinion, so I think that book is really good. Um, and then number four, I'm going to go Immortals. We're going to get out of sci-fi fantasy and hit up just kind of like literary fiction. He wrote A Gentleman in Moscow, Rules of Civility, and The Lincoln Highway. And I read all three
I
of
own
those.
2 of those books. I own 2,
Which
but have
ones?
not read them. Lincoln
Which ones?
Highway and, Gentleman in Moscow.
Gentleman in Moscow is like one of my favorite books that I've read in the last 3 years. Uh, that book is awesome. I really, really like that. His character work is so good. That he's one I haven't reread any. I'm planning to reread A Gentleman in Moscow soon, but he does some special things with characters that I feel like every time you read one of his books, you'd probably get something different out of it. You'd pick up something that you missed before, and I really enjoyed those. So those would be my 4 authors.
Cool. So we have Robert Jordan, Brando Sando, Werner Vinge. Is that his
Mhm.
name? And Amor Tolls.
Yep.
Okay. So we had this in the first episode too. We had some viewers submitting their very hardly thought over. Hobb would make mine.
Yeah.
Pratchett, I have not read enough. Martin, great choices. Some great
Yeah.
choices.
Pratchett and
You're
Hobb.
a fellow Vinge fan.
Yeah, Rogue. I think that's why he recommended In Conquest Born to me. Actually, was because he knew that I liked Fire from the Deep.
Britain says Bradbury, Moore, McCarthy, Dickens. Fourth might change. That's an interesting
Yeah,
conglomeration
I
there.
like Dickens. Pretty much everything I've read by Dickens, I've liked.
Just to touch on Drew's comment. Yes, I just saw recently a video of Miles Turner's like displaying his Lego collection in his house, and he has like a sick like bay window where he sits in front of and just builds Legos. Like he's crazy into Lego. He has a Miles Turner like Lego. I think it might be like a Darth Maul or something. I can't remember. He loves Legos. All right, so that will transition us nicely into who your Mount Rushmore of basketball players are. Again, this can be all time. This can be currently in the league, however you want to take it, and run with it.
I was trying to think of what I wanted to do for this. I'm gonna go. I think Mount Rushmore Thunder players.
Okay, I like that.
So it's definitely here's where it's gonna get weird because I mean it's got to be Russ. You know,
Right.
Russ has my heart forever and ever. Steven Adams. He's on there.
Love that pick.
Again,
Love that pick.
He has my heart forever. And then yes, the Thunder. Come on, man.
That's his team.
And then Shea. Shea for sure. And
SGA already worked his way in.
And then fourth is like I don't know. I don't want to say Kevin Durant because he's a snake. So, so I'm like, I don't know. I'll probably pick somebody from like the current iteration. So then at that point, I'm like, I'd maybe say Jalen Williams.
Interesting.
You're
really high on him.
Yeah, J-Dub is awesome. He's really good.
He's funny too. I've seen him in a lot of interviews.
Yeah, he's good. I love both of the Jalen Williamses. Since we have 2 people named Jalen Williams on the team, so
that's so funny.
You know,
I love that.
The Santa Clara Jalen Williams is the one that starts, and like he's awesome. And
no Harden.
Nah, man, Harden's a punk.
He is a punk.
Yeah. I loved Harden when he was on the team. Harden was, he was a fan favorite. We loved him. And then, I just read the book Boomtown, which is a nonfiction book about OKC, about the city, but it was written by, he was actually a sports reporter who went there to cover the Thunder. So it's talking about the 2012 year of the Thunder, and then it also flashes back and tells the history of the city of Oklahoma City, and they kind of talk about like why Harden got traded, and a lot of it has to do with like they basically were gonna give him a supermax, but it was like just under the supermax. It was like, I don't remember what the supermax number was at the time, but it was so close to be like pointless. And it kind of came down to like, was Harden going to be a team player, or was he going to want to have his own team? And it came to like, he wanted to have his own team. So at that point, it's like, he wasn't going to he was killing it as a sixth man. He was going to need to be in starting, and it's just like it wasn't going to last forever.
Yeah.
It was really disappointing the way it happened. I remember where I was when it happened. When he got traded, I was at an Oklahoma Sooners football game. They were playing Notre
Wow.
Dame. They ended up losing that game to Notre Dame, but at a certain point, you heard almost like everybody in the stands. You heard this collective like groan when everybody got the notification that Harden got traded because we were waiting to see if he was going to get signed. Yeah, Britain. It was like the saddest night in Oklahoma sports. OKC lost to Notre Dame, and then I know OSU lost that night. Tulsa lost that night. Harden got traded away. It was just like the saddest. It was the saddest walk home from the stadium. That was
That's
a huge
brutal.
bummer.
That's
So
brutal. I just want to touch on Drew's comment here because prime OKC Russ, I don't think people. I mean, people know how good he was. I still
yeah,
don't think people will give him enough. Like
no,
he normalized. You would see a stat line on a screen. Russell Westbrook, 50 points, 17 assists, 14 rebounds, and just think, oh, Russ had
yeah,
another good game.
Russ did it. Yeah,
That's an insane stat line. It was for a long period of time, the normal for him. Like
yeah,
people, he like took the awe factor out of getting a triple double. Like
yeah,
people were not doing that,
yeah.
and he was just every single night.
He was just insane to watch. He took everything personally, and to better or worse. And a lot of times, as an OKC fan, it was for our better that he would just have a grudge against everybody. He played angry all the time. Uh,
Oh,
Russ
he's
was
still fun to watch.
Yeah, Russ was he just absolutely insane. He still has a lot of athleticism at his age now, but when you go back and watch 2012 to 2014, even to 2016, Russ, it's just like he moves like everybody else is like stuck in jelly. He just like he attacks in such a vicious manner. It was so much fun to watch.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was a fun halftime show. We had some you and Britain can now commiserate about a
I
memory you
know.
both probably felt very alone in
That was so
at the
bad.
time.
Ugh.
We're gonna move on to the third quarter. So we've had our halftime discussion. You're back in the locker room. We'll start with books as usual. What adjustments are you making, if anything, coming out of the half? So this could be about your personal reading journey. You are a professional in the industry, so you could maybe talk about some things you'd like to see changed. Again, kind of open to your interpretation, but do you like where you're at? Are you going to keep going? Do you want to keep playing the way you're playing, or do you want to make some tweaks in your game?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just made my like halftime tweaks in the last like couple months in the way that I'm approaching reading, and that I had been reading almost exclusively like science fiction fantasy for a while. I've been reading a lot of it, and uh and I decided, what, I need to branch out a little bit more, start reading some different stuff, and it's really made my reading way more fun. Just reading, really going hard on mood reading and just kind of reading whatever piques my interest. I I'm at a bookstore, so I see people come in and are excited about all sorts of different things that I never would have, it never would have crossed my mind to be interested in that book. And then you see people's excitement about it, and it's infectious. You're like, okay, I got to give that a try. And like, I've got people who work with me that they read different things, and so they they get me wanting to read it. Like I read A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan. It's one of the owners. It's one of her favorite books, and I never would have read it otherwise. And that book kind of blew me away. I was really impressed with that one. So
That's cool.
reading outside of my genre, mixing it up, and then also mixing in more middle grade because I've taken on buying for the kids section at my store.
Oh wow. Okay.
And so I'm doing all of the like picture books to like middle grade level. Somebody else does YA because I don't care about YA. But I'm reading more middle grade, and I'm really having a lot of fun sprinkling that in. So just kind of like mixing up my reading has been really good for me. So I'm not making too many more adjustments from that. I think it's just I made the adjustments that I needed, and now I'm pretty happy going forward. I think.
That's awesome. That's really cool that you're getting to pick some of the children's and the middle grade stuff too, because as a future teacher, I think a lot about that stuff, and I peruse kind of Goodwill and try to pick up some stuff that I might be able to have in my classroom
Mhm.
someday. And it's difficult to not every children's book, just because it's a children's book, should be read to children, in my opinion. I've read
Yeah.
some children's books and picture books that I'm like, I don't really know if I agree with the message you're
Yeah.
trying to send here.
Yeah.
Middle grade gets a little bit more. I think you're touching on some themes that I mean, the kids at that age are going to be pretty emotional
Yeah.
through a lot with adolescence and stuff like that. So that's cool that you're getting to experience, and explore some of that genre. I think it'll pay off a lot too when your kids get older.
Yeah. My hot take is that you could get rid of young adult completely. That it should just be gone. We shouldn't have young adult. People should just read middle grade and read adult books and and call it good. I I
It's an
think
interesting take.
uh I think middle grade is is what a lot of us think YA is going to be in some ways. Especially when in terms of like when you hear people complaining about like content stuff that's in young adult books, in middle grade there really is no kind of like there's not really any questionable contents. It's much more tame, um, and so that's what people are banning YA books all the time because they're writing in a more adult manner. I think what's kind of, in my opinion, sucks about young adult is that there are rather than like character and like content stuff that makes it a genre. There's like a certain there's a writing style that's really prevalent in YA where I just don't like it. I just don't like a lot of the actual like writing that happens in YA. I think it assumes that the people reading YA like kind of can't handle certain literary devices and like they can't handle certain uh like that it kind of just like writes down to kids that it's like, oh, I'm gonna write this way because we're like trying to sound like teenagers or whatever. And it's like, I didn't read any young adult stuff when I was a kid. I just went to adult books and like do what Stephen King does, where like Stephen King will write, he'll write books that have kids as protagonists. He'll write books that have teenagers as protagonists. Like you can still have characters that age, but just like write the book like an intelligent person is gonna read it. Don't write it like you think the person that's reading it is dumb. And unfortunately, a lot of the YA that I have tried, that has been the case. I'm sure that's not across the board, but like I don't love the YA stuff. So
Yeah, I don't want to put words
yeah.
into either AP's or the Library Ladder's mouth. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Library Ladder's channel. Both of these channels are fantastic. But one of these two I heard speaking about a very interesting topic where there's just been a shift in, it seems like kind of what you're talking about, where authors seem to be writing in a more simplistic, written down form to a younger audience. And the argument that one of these two fine gentlemen, who I can't remember whose video I watched, I feel so bad, but their argument was that this is actually doing children a tremendous disservice in
Mhm.
assuming that they are not intelligent enough to use context clues to understand the story based on just the words that they do understand. I mean, I
Yeah.
know that that especially around the middle grade age, you should be challenging yourself. Like I feel like you shouldn't be flying through books. You're in a phase where you're still acquiring tons of new vocabulary, and you're wanting to expand your understanding and get prepared to read adult books. You don't want to read like, I mean, not that you can't read a book like, Charlotte's Web or something when you're in sixth grade or whatever, but I feel like the author's writing down to assuming that they understand the student's knowledge level is doing students a disservice, and assuming that they won't be able to comprehend a more complicated text with difficult vocabulary in it.
Yeah. Derry talks about reading like Anne McCaffrey's Pern. So like Pern, Wizard of Earthsea, that kind of stuff. There's some of Heinlein's books are kind of more for like kind of a younger age. I don't know, but like uh there's a whole genre of these kind of like classics of sci-fi and fantasy that now get kind of lumped in with middle grade, but when you read them, the language is so much more elevated um, than what you get in most middle grade now. So I, I'm reading more middle grade, and I'm really looking for the stuff that is um, not dumbing it down and being more interesting. Um, so it is for sure it is for sure a challenge, and I think that's what's wrong with YA is that it's at that point you should just write like you're writing for adults. Um,
Yeah. And I mean, like Drew said, this might be true, but is this a fallout of authors writing down to people? Like,
yeah,
I know, like, being in school for teaching, one of the most important things is, especially, for children that may be of a slightly higher intelligence than some of the rest of their classmates, is finding a way to keep people engaged. If I feel like I'm being written down to, I am much less likely to want to continue reading
yeah,
that book, that author. If I don't feel like I'm being challenged and like gaining something, moving from the experience. I don't know. And I don't know. I mean, these are all just assumptions, but they're fun things
yeah,
to chat about, and
yeah.
especially for book lovers.
It's an interesting conundrum. Public education is wild. My wife is a teacher, so there's lots of stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about the adjustments, if any, you would make to the NBA. I know we talked about, we both generally agree that the NBA is putting on a pretty good product right now, but do you have any issues with refereeing? Any issues with how technical fouls are assessed? Anything, just to throw some examples out there. Is there anything you would like to change about the game that you think would make it a more enjoyable product for the fans to watch and for the players to play?
Yeah, I you know I'm not too sure. It's hard. I was listening to you and Dan talk about it, and I think the refs there is a big part of that. I think something's kind of got to change with the way we approach fouls and how certain things are called. Um, you know, now that coaches get two challenges, it's like before it'd be like, man, it'd be so nice to have a second challenge. And then now it's like we get a second challenge, and it's like, can we have a third one? Because they'll make some just terrible calls. And if it's like in the first quarter, coaches don't want to challenge it because they're like, well, I'm going to wait until later. Um, and see some absolute like terrible stuff happening. And so I would like things to be more consistent. I think around refereeing. Um, I think with like the way technical fouls are called, I think that has just like become real dumb in the last couple months.
I agree.
Of just like suddenly refs decided, oh, now we're not going to let you do the same stuff that you've been doing all this time, and and they're kicking people out for stuff that before they felt like was okay, um, and yeah, that part. I think they're inserting themselves into the game a little bit too much at that point. You have refs that like obviously don't like certain players and stuff like, and that's just not cool. So I don't know. I don't have any good ideas for like what you could change. Like how you could change refereeing to make it easier because that's got to be an incredibly hard job. Um, but they need to do something to make it easier. Um,
Bye, Derry.
Hi, Derry.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
for
joining.
hanging out for a while.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think, if there's anything, it would be to make refereeing more consistent. And I know Dan and I talked about this. It's just frustrating watching stars get star treatment and other players play
Yeah.
that way. I don't know if do you ever watch the Old Man and the Three, JJ Redick's
Mhm.
podcast?
Yeah,
I
I watch it
love
every
JJ
I
Redick.
watch it every once in a while.
I don't watch his podcast per se, but I see a lot of clips.
Yeah.
And he's a very candid, like, will just say things the way that he sees them, and I respect
Yeah.
that about him. But he talked the other day about, listen, the greats in any era, they get to the line. Like, people complaining about Joel Embiid and Harden and these guys, like, getting
Yeah.
to the line, like, they're talented enough to exploit a part of the game. All great players of any era get to the free throw line. That's not the problem. The problem is the inconsistency, because when you get players that are like stars but aren't superstars,
Yeah.
they're driving to the lane the same way. They're trying to take the same shots. They're trying to draw the same contact, and they aren't getting the foul calls. And you
Yeah.
see it a lot with mid-tier teams. Like, I know Shea gets to the line a lot, but there's a lot of mid-tier teams that have stars on them, and they'll drive to the hoop the same
Yeah.
way I see Joel and Harden and Russ and all these guys drive to the hoop, and they won't get the foul call, and it turns what could be a good decision, trying to drive and get free shots, into a horrible possession because they don't get the same treatment as the other players. And that's why I think a lot of players and coaches get frustrated, because what are you supposed to do? How are you going to call me for this foul on the other end against
Yeah.
LeBron, but not call Rui Hachimura when he does it to Zach Levine?
Yeah.
Like, it's, so
Yeah.
um
I 100% agree. It's, because Shea gets the calls now, most of the time. And he doesn't complain to the refs is one of the things that, like, you'll see him do it a little bit more now, but he really, for the most part, he just doesn't do it. And then you see other people like Jalen Williams will do stuff, but he's, second year. Last year he was a rookie. He wasn't getting the calls.
yeah,
Um
he's Jalen Williams.
yeah. And so for me, I think the way that games have been officiated, it encourages people to play for the foul rather than for the bucket, and things were like, the end of the game of, like, any game that's relatively close is decided by, like, free throws from intentional fouls and stuff rather than, um, it's like a real basket. Like, I want to see people playing basketball, not shooting free throws at the
Yeah.
end of the game.
And they've done some things to alleviate that with, like, the transition take foul, and they've
Right.
tried to
Yeah.
penalize
Um,
players for just, uh do you guys think the double step back move, I think that this stuff is kind of minimal to the NBA. I mean, again, if you think about it from a fundamental basketball standpoint, the gather step and the
yeah.
step back that Harden does, they're
Yeah.
travels. They're travels, but they make the offensive side of the NBA so much more exciting that they're just going to
Yeah.
let stuff slide, or they're going to make up rules like the gather step that allow it to be
Yeah.
a thing. Because watching Harden hit a step back three and get fouled for 4-point play is way more exciting than Harden getting called for 3 travels a game because he does this double step back.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I
It's
think that's like part of the business aspect of the NBA, personally.
yeah. I think it's exactly what you said. Uh Technically, yes, there are like a million travels a game if you watch the way that people play. Um, and they've just decided that that they've decided that traveling, unless it's egregious, they're just not really going to call it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it is what it is.
I mean, how many clips do you see of like Giannis one dribble from half court? And it's
Yeah,
like, okay, but he like took 2 dribbles with the ball in his hand, then dribbled it at the 3-point line, and
yeah,
then took 2 steps and dunked it.
yeah,
So, like, yeah, it was one dribble, but like, of course, there was a bunch of steps. So I
yeah,
think that stuff's less of a problem personally than just simple consistency with refereeing. That's my biggest
yeah,
gripe with the NBA right now.
yeah, yeah. Fundamental basketball, it exists at a different level. I think it was JJ Redick's podcast. I think it was him or somebody else that was talking about, like, coaching their kid, and their kid was doing, like, the gather step, and in a game he did it and he got called for a travel, and he was he was like, ref, he's like, it was the gather step. The ref was like, they're 10, there's no gather step here. So
Yeah.
it's different.
I think this is a great solution.
Yeah.
Let the players play.
Yeah.
That's what people want to see. People hate I mean, I personally hate watching NFL games, hockey games, any games where everything is getting called. It ruins the flow of the game. It ruins like the enjoyment of watching players play. Nobody can get in a groove. People are missing jump shots because the game's just not flowing. And then you move on to a different group of referees the next night in a different city, and they call the game differently. It's like,
Yeah.
what do you know? I don't know.
Yeah, it's
Um,
it's hard to measure like, intent in the moment, but like for the most part, you can kind of when you're watching the game, you can kind of tell that people if they're making a when they're making a play for the basketball and that kind of thing, that they're not it's not a foul. Like they're making a play for the basketball and it is what it is. Um and then there are the actual fouls that are like really impeding their progress.
yeah,
And I think that's the more important thing. Like you'll see people get called and it's like there was a game a couple weeks ago where Jalen Williams got called. I think it was Steph Curry like drove into the lane and then like jumped up and made like this little shot, and Jalen Williams was like on him, and then basically like he kind of like reached out and basically like touched his butt as Curry was making this shot, and he got called for the foul on it. It's like it didn't affect Curry at all, and it's like how is that a foul? And then you see people get like absolutely trucked, and they're like, nah, that's not a foul. It's weird. Um,
thank you for stopping in, Drew, and
yeah,
being
thanks,
active in
Drew.
the chat. It's been awesome to have you. Um, we are going to work our way towards the fourth quarter and kind of try to rein things in here
Yeah,
because it is
yeah, it's getting late for you.
past the hour and a half
Yeah.
mark. Yeah, but I've been sleeping all day because if you guys don't know
Oh
that, I
yeah.
currently have tested positive for the big C. So my sleep schedule is just out the window. So I'll probably be up till 4 in the morning, just feeling pretty awful. But hey, this has been a blast,
Yeah,
and
this has been
we're
awesome.
gonna round it out with the fourth quarter here. And these are just some fun kind of wind down questions. Uh, what keeps you coming back to reading? And I asked this, it's kind of similar to Joanna's why read. In today's day and age, there are so many forms of entertainment that offer instant gratification. Shorts on YouTube, TikTok, just watching people play video games on Twitch, watching movies, watching TV shows, watching YouTube. What keeps you coming back to the physical act of reading books after all this?
Yeah. Sorry.
Not that big C. No, I don't think you test
No.
positive for that kind of big C.
I was
But
like,
well played, Rogue.
what a way to casually drop that you have cancer. It's just like,
No, I don't have cancer now.
uh, um, okay. So my short answer for what keeps me coming back to reading is that it's the only form of entertainment that like makes me feel better after it. Um, and by that, it's like if you watch 4 hours of Netflix, you feel like trash afterwards. Like it's just like it's I've never once I don't care how good the show is, after sitting on the couch watching TV for 4 hours, you're just like, I feel bad. Uh, I could read a book all day and then feel good afterward. Um, that's kind of the big difference of what keeps me coming back to it is that, uh, I think reading is ultimately good for you. Um, and to kind of I guess to go a little bit more long-winded, um, I think reading helps train your attention span. Um, is It's really good for that. Uh, there's an author that I really like who writes nonfiction stuff, Cal Newport, and he often recommends reading as a way to for people who are really struggling with focus, um, to get into reading and like kind of do like reading sprints basically of like start
Huh.
even super small of like 10 minutes and just be like, I'm going to read for 10 minutes, not going to do anything else, not going to look at my phone, read for 10 minutes. After you can do that for a little while, up it to 20 minutes. Can you do that? Because you hear people all the time, they're like, I can't, I can't focus on reading, I can't watch a movie without checking my phone 3 times watching a movie. And I was really big into Twitter for a long time. I was on Twitter from like 2009 to 2019. But from 2016 on, for reasons, Twitter became a hellscape, and so I was really trying to leave it. And eventually, what helped me is I deleted Twitter from my phone and I downloaded Libby. And so then every time that I had the urge to like get onto social media, I would read instead. And so instead of like jumping into the hellscape and feeling bad about the world and myself and all that stuff, I would read and I would feel better afterward. So I think reading's good for you, and I think that reading helps promote empathy, especially reading fiction. I know people who read like exclusively nonfiction, and you're reading biographies and stuff, you're getting empathy as well. But I think with fiction specifically, you're reading so many other people, you're experiencing so many other people's lives, uh, that you can't help but kind of like learn to take on new perspectives and experience life in a different way for yourself in the real world. And I think that's very powerful in a way that you're not in somebody's head when you're watching a movie. I don't care how good the movie is. Like, it's going to be a really good piece of art, but you're not in their head in the way that you are in a book. So yeah, I just reading is the best.
That's beautifully said. I think, for me, it's just a deeply personal experience that you can't, and two people can read the same book and experience it completely differently. And you just don't get that when things are being portrayed for you. So I agree. That's an awesome, awesome answer. And the same question will come for basketball. What keeps you coming back to basketball? We're not old heads yet,
Yeah,
but we've lived through a lot of different eras of college and NBA basketball. So what
yeah.
keeps you coming back to the sport?
I think I think basketball is one of the most exciting sports to watch because there's so much, there's so much movement, and it's fast paced. Uh, it's like I joke around sometimes that it's like if soccer wasn't boring, it'd be basketball. Because it's like structure wise, it's like there are similar ideas happening in basketball and soccer, but the court's smaller and people score. So
Yeah.
uh, so I think the excitement factor, the now the fact that like the games are, they're only like 2 hours. As a dad, that's a big motivator for me. That like
Huge.
I used to be really big into football, but like I can't watch 4 hours of a
Yeah.
game. Like you've got some of these college games that last forever because it's like they're passing all the time, and then commercials and halftime and all that stuff. It's like I can't watch a full game. I don't remember the last time that I watched like a full football game because they're just so long. And I've got young kids that can't sit there and watch a full game. Um, but basketball's on at night, so a lot of times I'm catching games, especially for me. I'm catching games with OKC, uh, like right around like when bedtime's happening. So it's like bedtime's going. I might miss like a little bit of the first quarter, but then I get to catch most of the game, and they're short, and so I'm not up all night. And yeah,
I think he's referring to American football.
oh yeah, American football. I have never really watched soccer football. Um, that's
Me neither.
I've tried a couple times, and even as somebody who played it, it just kind of, I didn't have a team. That's a hard thing. Is like I do kind of need a way in, uh, and being having like the Oklahoma City Thunder. Like I'm from Oklahoma. I grew up there, but I don't live in Oklahoma anymore. I've lived in New Mexico since 2014. Um, and so Oklahoma City Thunder is kind of a way to it kind of keeps me connected to where I'm from in that sense. So that keeps me coming back to okay, see, I'm still a big Sooners fan, um, and that keeps me connected to where I went to college. So yeah, I
Awesome.
was uh, I was listening to something. Maybe it was The Ringer. They have like the hottest take podcast, and I think it was on there that somebody was like, get rid of baseball and professional volleyball should be like the other big sport in America. that you should just baseball can be gone and
Interesting.
bring in volleyball instead. Um, well, okay,
It's
so Britton, I love football. I absolutely love it. Um, but I just can't watch it. It's just too long. Like I will watch a quarter here and there, and like I play fantasy football, so like I mean I'm consuming a lot of football content throughout the week. Like I'm listening to fantasy football podcasts, and I'll watch stuff here and there. And when OU is playing, I try to catch them, but I work on Saturdays, so that doesn't always happen. I love football, um, but I just at this stage of my life, I can't watch a full game. That'll change
it,
in like 5 years, but but
yeah.
until my baby is old enough to sit through a game, I can't watch football.
Great answer. Great answer. And on that note, that will conclude our game slash our discussion. And I just want to take a minute to thank you, Robert, for being a fantastic second guest on Books of Basketball. This was a blast. I had so much
Yeah,
fun in this
this was
discussion.
awesome. Dan was so entertaining and so fun that I was like, man, he really set the bar. Why couldn't Dan be boring?
I knew with Dan and with you guys being my first two guests that we wouldn't have any problem finding things to talk about. And
Yeah,
that proved to be true. And I want to thank everybody. There's been far more people that have shown up for this
yeah,
live than I anticipated. And you guys have been fantastic in the chat.
yeah. You guys have been great.
Made this experience so much more fun. So I want to thank you guys all that have been here for being active in the chat and taking time out of your night to spend with us here. But yeah, that's going to do it. Robert, do you want to let people know where they can find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, Punk Rock City Bowl on YouTube, and then we've got a shared Discord, the Unexpected Party. I'm sure Colin will link that down below. I link it. I have it linked in the bottom of all of my videos, so you should be able to find it there. I think that I set it for like an always active link. We'll see if that's
Yeah.
true or not. But find us there. We're always chatting up, and we've got a sports section where I feel that's been a little more lively lately, where
Yeah, it has been.
we've been talking more sports in there. So if you want to mix more books and basketball, hit up our Discord, because we actually are talking about stuff.
Yes, I will certainly link that in the description of this video after we get off the live. But thank you guys again all for being here. I hope you guys are all enjoying what you're currently reading and watching. And thank you for stopping by. See you later.